George falls asleep in his room, tightly hugging his beloved dinosaur, Mr. Dinosaur. The clock on the wall ticks slowly, showing midnight in the dark nursery. The teddy bear's eyes begin to glow with a strange green light in darkness. Mr. Dinosaur turns his head and looks directly at the sleeping George carefully. Toy cars start driving around the floor by themselves, making quiet engine sounds. The doll in the corner of the room slowly stands up and takes step. Lego blocks assemble into strange figures without anyone's help at all completely. Mr. Dinosaur whispers mysterious words in an unknown language to George's ear. Plush animals form a circle around the bed and begin to hum quietly. George opens his eyes and sees all the toys looking at him intently. Mr. Dinosaur speaks in a human voice about secrets only he knows well. The toys tell George about other children who lived here before him. The dollhouse begins to glow from within, showing a miniature family inside it. George tries to call his mother, but his voice doesn't obey him completely. The toys surround the bed more tightly, their eyes burning brightly in darkness. Mr. Dinosaur tells about what happens at night in this house secretly. The teddy bear shows George drawings that appear by themselves on paper. The toy train rides through the air, leaving a glowing trail behind it. George realizes that the toys want to tell him a very important secret. In the morning, the toys freeze in their places, but George remembers everything. The pig family packs a picnic basket, but the food looks strange and unappetizing somehow. Daddy Pig drives down a road that becomes narrower and darker with each passing mile. Fog envelops the forest, hiding trees that seem too tall and unnaturally twisted and bent. Peppa steps out of the car and notices forest sounds are muffled and echo strangely. Mummy Pig spreads a blanket on a clearing where grass has an unnatural gray tint. George plays with his dinosaur, but the toy moves by itself in the thick fog. Grandpa Pig tells a story about a forest where time flows differently and much slower. Granny Pig takes pies from the basket that smell of unfamiliar and strange spices. Peppa goes to pick berries but finds fruits that glow softly in the dim light. The family sits to eat, but food tastes different from what they prepared at home. Fog grows thicker, and tree silhouettes begin to resemble frozen human figures standing still. George points to shadows between trees that move against the direction of the light. Daddy Pig tries to find the way back, but all paths lead deeper into forest. Mummy Pig calls the children, but her voice echoes off invisible walls around them. Peppa notices their reflections in a puddle show completely different people and strange creatures. Grandpa Pig looks at his watch, which runs backwards and shows the wrong time. Granny Pig whispers spells over leftover food, trying to find a way out of forest. The family packs up, but the basket becomes heavier as if filled with invisible objects. They walk to the car, but the vehicle stands not where they left it. The fog clears for a moment, revealing they are in a completely different place now. An unusual silence fell over Peppa Pig's house. Sunlight streamed through the windows, but brought no warmth. Peppa and George were playing in the garden, where a small, perfectly round piece of red velvet lay on the grass. It seemed so harmless, yet its presence felt alien. That evening, at dinner, Daddy Pig sat at the table, his eyes vacant, his lips moving silently as if repeating some ancient melody. He slowly raised his hand and pointed to an invisible spot in the air, his movements mechanical and devoid of all emotion. Mummy Pig tried to speak to him, but he didn't respond. The next morning, When Peppa woke up, she found Daddy Pig's pillow empty, with the same red velvet circle lying on it. Mummy Pig sat in the living room, her gaze distant, her lips silently repeating the same melody. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just sat there, immersed in her strange grief. George was playing with his toys, his eyes vacant, and he swayed from side to side, emitting a low, monotonous hum. Peppa tried to get his attention, but he didn't respond. She felt a cold fear creep into her heart. She looked in the mirror, and her reflection distorted, becoming pale and frightened. The melody from the forest, which she had heard before, now sounded much louder and seemed to be everywhere. She closed her eyes, trying to drown it out, but it only intensified. That night, as Peppa lay in her bunk bed, she heard George slowly getting out of the bottom bunk. His eyes were vacant, and he moved mechanically towards the window. Peppa tried to wake Mummy Pig, but she was in a deep, unnatural sleep. Peppa was left alone in the house, surrounded by the monotonous hum. She went to the window and saw a shadowy figure resembling a Squid Game guard standing in the distance. The figure slowly raised its hand, then lowered it. Mummy Pig came to the window, her eyes vacant, and she stared at the figure. The figure slowly raised its hand, then lowered it. Mummy Pig closed her eyes. Her lips began to silently repeat the chant. The red velvet circle lay on her pillow. The empty house filled with the melody, which became even deeper and richer, as if new voices had joined it. Peppa was left alone, surrounded by this ominous sound, which now seemed to be a part of her. She knew the game had begun, and she was in it alone. Evening came. Peppa Pig's house was full of the usual activity. Mummy Pig cooking dinner, Daddy Pig sorting papers, Peppa drawing, and George playing with dinosaurs. Suddenly, George went silent. He sat still, staring at one point, unresponsive to Peppa's voice. She moved closer, but he didn't react. His eyes were empty, as if seeing through her, through the walls, through everything. This wasn't like George. His skin grew pale, his pink fading. Peppa grew uneasy and called Mummy Pig, but wasn't heard. She shook George. He was stiff, almost stone-like. She shouted louder. Mummy Pig came and grew worried too. Daddy Pig joined them. George seemed trapped in a trance. His breathing was shallow, and he felt weightless. The room turned cold, despite closed windows. Peppa shivered. George's eyes darkened. Mummy Pig hugged him, but he stayed cold. Daddy Pig suggested going to Dr. Elephant. Then George suddenly stood up. He slowly turned to Peppa, smiling unnaturally. It wasn't his smile. It was something alien. Peppa backed away. George walked toward her silently. Mummy and Daddy Pig tried to stop him, but he pushed them aside effortlessly. His strength was terrifying. Peppa tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. George approached, eyes glowing with a cold, strange light. He reached out to her. She felt numb, paralyzed. He touched her. The world blurred. Colors faded. Sound vanished. Something inside Peppa began to dissolve. She was changing. The last thing she saw was George's eerie smile. She was no longer Peppa. She had become like him. Silence settled over the house. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig stared at their children, both lifeless and hollow, eyes locked on nothing, faces pale and blank. They stood side by side like dolls. No one knew what had happened. No one knew what would come. There was no more laughter, only a cold, silent presence. And far beyond their world, something waited. It was just beginning. It wanted everyone, and it will, very soon. It's already close. It's already here.